All right. My name is Matthew Barnes. Live here in the Springs, of course, and I have been on an interesting journey to get here. I started in civil engineering, was designing buildings for earthquakes, etc. Dropped out of grad school to do a startup, like a bunch of my favorite people, and got heavily into e-commerce, analytics, and all of that world, and then went on to co-own a custom software development company. And now I'm taking kind of everything that I've learned like along the way and wrapping it up because, I mean, this is 2019, right? Technology should hold the promise for the future and community. And the fun part about the future is that you're living in somebody else's future right now, right? So everybody in the 50s, right, we kind of come out of the war and we have this amazing idea for utopia. We're going to do all of this industry now, so let's build a better future. And you know, what a utopia we kind of built for ourselves. This highly centralized world, right, where we wanted greater independence. The promise was abundance, globalism, and growth of economies. And we got a lot of those things, but we also got isolation, where now everybody is really disconnected from their neighbors. Abundance led to excess. Globalism led to dependency, where things that people are doing halfway across the world now affect me here in ways that I can possibly enjoy or conceive. And that growth, well, it kind of got concentrated, right? That centralism led to a lot of disparity. So when we're looking at a system, right, we want to say, okay, that's heavily centralized. On the other end of the spectrum, there's distribution. So should we make everything distributed, right? Let's just use cryptocurrency for everything. Probably not a great idea. So what's in the middle, right? So when we say decentralized, what do we mean? Oftentimes, we don't actually mean what we think we mean, which is like a fully distributed system. We mean some sort of halfway, right? How do we organize a group of distributed individuals, and how the heck can we do that? So we look at like what a centralized system is, right? It has a bunch of good things going for it. We have organization. You can provide a lot of resources and exposure, and it's supposed to come with accountability, right? There's somebody now to point to when something goes wrong. When it falls short, organization turns into concentrated power, resources and exposure turns into necessity and dependency as we make those the only systems that we can operate in. And instead of accountability, we get monopolies and we just kind of have to deal with it, right? It sort of falls short. So, all right, let's go to the other side of the spectrum. Distributed. This is kind of cool, right? It's hot. Somebody said blockchain, I'm sure of it. So, what does that offer? What is the promise of a distributed system, right? We can align the incentives. Now we have everybody kind of interacting together. We've distributed the power, so we don't have the central entity. There's a low barrier to entry, and it's flexible. You can decide what it is, right, as the masses. When you fall short, it leads to shallow goals because there's no real concentrated vision. Because you have a low barrier to entry, bad actors can get in, and extreme flexibility turns into solving nothing and just utter chaos. So let's look at the middle, right, and all the ways that this is going to take shape and what maybe the promise is for it. So how do we find that sweet spot? How do we find the right amount of centralization or the right amount of distributed decentralization? And is your other technology. So the promise should be that we have the technology and the power to do this, right? Everybody sitting in this room is working on something that hopefully is achieving that goal, that better non-polarized system. So an example of this, right, that everybody probably has interacted with is getting a ride, right? I'm in the city and I need to get somewhere. So I go with the centralized route. Maybe I'll take a cab, right? You have a company who owns a fleet of vehicles. It's really hard to get into. As a user, it's just that one. I guess I'll just get in it, right? I don't really get much of a vote in this sort of thing. I go to the distributed method and try to hitchhike. And hopefully it's not, it's the old joke. How do I know you're not a serial killer? What's the chances of two serial killers to get in the same car? It's not a great system either because I have no predictability or reliability that I'm going to get anywhere. So what do we have in the middle? Well, of course, it's like ride sharing, right? So the interesting thing about this is it's not a distributed system. It's not exactly like an entirely centralized system either, right? It's something in the middle where you have a centralized organization that is handling some of the accountability and infrastructure, right? Providing a platform or a marketplace where people can come in that have a vehicle and somebody who needs a ride, and you get to play matchmaker. So like my favorite thing about Uber is Lyft, right? Is that the fact that there is competition. I don't have to go buy a fleet of cars to start my own cab company. I can just build a better clone of Uber that doesn't suck as much, and then everybody can jump onto that. And so it adds healthy competition, right? Because we're hitting somewhere in the middle. So sort of this theme, this idea I want us to try to wrap our heads around is how do we find that middle? How do we build platforms? How do we foster organization, right, without shutting everybody else out? So how do we know when decentralization is working, right? Like, what are the hallmark of like a good system of this? I think there's like 4 really important things. So you're going to push the power towards the user, right? Everybody wants everything to be self-serve. I know I do, right? Have your groceries delivered, do rideshare, whatever, right? I want to make the choices. I want you to surface the knowledge, right? And allow me to make that informed decision. But I still want there to be accountability, right? So if it's just completely distributed and it's a free-for-all, we don't want that either, right? How do we do insurance for ride sharing, right? That's a really hard question. The big thing is that the overhead is lowered, which means that the barrier to compete is also lowered, right? So by providing these marketplaces, these decentralized systems that have some sort of accountability, but we allow people to come in and join and lower that barrier to entry, we get all of the promise of capitalism back, right? In terms of competition and actually the thing that's the best rising to the top. So, my topic is about community. So what the heck is taking it back, right? So we have this idea of community that's kind of a holdover, right? And so we live in our houses that are, isolated from the person next to us. I don't know if you ever live somewhere and then you actually move out and you realize you don't know any of your neighbors. Somehow that happened. We live in a society that's pushing us constantly to rely less on other people. And so we value what they do less, and then surprise, it comes full circle, and people don't value what we do either, right? This is the weird thing of working in tech, is that nobody gives a crap what we do, they just want it to work. Because they never meet any of us, right? So I don't know the person that makes my clothes or that grows my food. I have no ability to have contact with them, so I don't care about them. From a community perspective, how do we get people out there to value what we do, and how do we value what they do? There should be this way, right, to leverage technology and allow people to come back together again through some of these platforms. So the 2 that I'm focusing on right now is housing and food. This is just low-level stuff, right? If we want society to advance and achieve great things, we should probably take care of basic necessities. There are just not enough houses, and our food system is really kind of lacking. So take the example of buying a house, right? So we have this problem, this wonderful problem in Colorado Springs that we're growing a ton, right? So my wife and I were like, maybe we want to buy a house, right? We move here, we start renting. All the used ones are taken, right? The market, as soon as something comes up, it's just sold instantaneously. And that is a really stressful system to try to buy a house in. So there's all these developments that pop up everywhere, right? So when we think about buying a house, we look at it as a system. It's helpful sometimes to think about what are the ways that we can do it in a centralized fashion versus fully distributed, and then what's that part in the middle, right? Because oftentimes the decentralization, that happy middle, comes from how do we centralize the right things, right, and leave the other things distributed. So they get these builder communities, right? So you have these houses, they buy a big piece of land and throw a bunch of houses down. It's all about density because they want to make a bunch of money, of course. And the houses are, it has some stuff going for it, like competitive price. I can actually maybe afford one of these things. That's pretty sweet since I have to live somewhere. And I sort of get some options. I can pick some floor plans and all of that fun stuff. And I got neighbors. That must be community. So why don't we move right in? Unfortunately, the competitive price portion, right? Housing is this weird thing where the price keeps going up and the quality keeps going down. So you have all of these options, but oftentimes they don't have this contextual element to it, right? So we're putting vinyl windows in Colorado where we're a mile up in the air closer to the sun. The average lifespan of a vinyl window is 7 years, right? So of course they move into a house and replace that in 7 years. So it's this lack of context to the space around you. You have houses that look on the highway. Just point in the other direction. Why is my backyard literally right there? Can't we do better than that, right? The promise of technology is supposed to be that we can leverage all of the stuff that we've learned. And then I have neighbors, right? Well, it's just a whole bunch of like yards all next to each other. There's no real community built there. It's no different than living in like an apartment, right? So let's do the other thing. Man, I'll just custom build a house, right? If I want it to be a certain quality and everything, I'll do the fully distributed method. I'll hire my own people. I'll build my own house. I can control the quality. It'll be custom. I know it'll be contextual to where I live. And I control where the location is. I might be able to move it closer to where I feel community exists. Except that is super expensive, right? And it's very slow because it's going to be custom. You're going to pay for the same stuff that everybody else pays for over and over and over. Massive redundancy. And location, if you can afford land in Colorado Springs, it'll be like rich people, because that's basically where we're at, is the land is super hard to get to, right? So it's how do we marry the best bits of both? So we got to centralize some stuff, and we got to decentralize some stuff. So componentized housing, like prefab, right? That's kind of cool. It has this idea, right? So I always think about like when I get really frustrated with housing, I'm like, man, I bought my car, right? I don't have a bunch of raw steel shipped to Colorado Springs and then a mechanic builds me a car. That's stupid, right? But we build houses exactly like that. And in somewhere like San Diego, right, which is way more crowded than Colorado Springs, I'm going to pay local people to build a house, but I got to pay them to also live in the house. It gets expensive, like subsidized, like attainable housing in San Diego is like $450,000. Like it's crazy, right? That is cheap housing. So when we looked at this, it's how do we leverage things? How do we centralize the right things and decentralize other things, right? So legislation can get in the way. So we have to work backwards. We have to use technology in our favor, right? So there are existing building codes everywhere. So we work backwards from those and create a system for componentized housing. We now can build it offsite, right? We can let the users design. I mean, the Tesla is an interesting example of this, right? So if you want to buy a car, there are a whole bunch of loopholes that a car company would have to get through to have showrooms and dealerships and everything. It's a whole lobbying nightmare. They just circumvented the whole thing. You just go on the internet and order a car and just drive it to your house. They pushed the power back in the user's hands, right? So that you don't have to be beholden to that. And because you're building it in an assembly line fashion, right? So this modular, componentized, prefab style housing, you can control quality, you can use economies of scale, and you have the same people building the houses over and over and over again. Just the way that we do automobile manufacturing. And the really cool part for community for this is that this model, right, because we are centralizing all the bits that are expensive we just do over and over and over again, it allows for greater design flexibility. So if I'm shipping Legos to a site, ahead of time you can design that, right, with these communal spaces that can allow people to actually have to interact with their neighbors. You can have cool things like coffee shops integrated into communities. You can have, opportunities for local food, et cetera, actually like taking pieces of land that otherwise wouldn't necessarily be developed because they might be too small, right, to do this giant scale type thing. You can actually customize something that works. I'm actually working on a project for this. So it's my own pain turned into a product, which is how some of our favorite things get done. And so again, right, all of those values reflect those things of like, how do we know when we're doing it right? How do we know when we have a good decentralized system? The power's been pushed towards the user, right? So you let somebody decide what fits for them. You let them customize it as much as possible. You still have a central body that there's accountability maintained within. You've now lowered the overhead because you can build it off-site and just drive it to the place just like you do a car. And the barrier to compete is lowered because if you can do this model, why can't somebody else do it, right? Which is good. You want healthy competition in a system. I don't want to have to just settle for whatever's around, right? Let's try 19. I don't want to settle. I want to be able to choose stuff. So buying foods, this is another interesting one, right? Another basic necessity that we have. So you have these centralized system, the supermarket, which provides a need. I don't know if you pay that much attention to ecological sustainability and et cetera, but there are great things going from the supermarket, right? You have predictability. I can show up and they're just going to have bananas, like they're just going to happen, right? Abundance, I'm not going to show up and be like, they don't have any food this week. That's a shame. And there's selection. I can choose like 50 different kinds of apple, which sounds really great. As we start like getting introspective about our own choices, we realize that Predictability means that we're shipping food that could technically just be grown here from really far away. And because we're shipping it that far and then storing it in this abundance and have all of these choices, the system's like really wasteful, right? Like a lot of food gets thrown away, which is not a good thing. We don't want that, right? Especially when we spent so much carbon to get it here. And that all of those selections start kind of pushing economies in weird places. I'm not sure if I've read about like avocados. Like, I love avocados, but like the whole system around avocados is like really whack. And like avocado cartels and things like that. So we've got like, all these knock-on effects. Because I don't know any of those people, it's really easy not to care when I have like a dead moment, right? I just need to eat my avocado toast for breakfast or whatever. So the wholly distributed method is I'm going to grow my own food. That's a stupid idea. I tried that. It's very local, and it's sustainable insofar as it didn't have to ship anywhere. You just carried it inside, and you can control the quality. But if you've ever tried to grow food, it is entirely unpredictable and super hard. Man, like people that want to be farmers, like bless them, because I do not have the green thumb. You also have like scarcity, right? Insofar as like, what if like it's not a good season and we get hail, or just is 13 degrees for some inexplicable reason one day. And also my selection's limited because I can only grow so much stuff, and only so much stuff grows in my backyard. I have a different soil type, whatever. So we have local food. So this is something that I'm also working on. So I've participated in like local food wherever I've lived for like the last 10 years. It's a really crummy experience. If you ever go to the farmer's market, I like talk to people. They're like, I tried the farmer's market once. I wanted strawberries, and then they didn't have strawberries. I don't go to the farmer's market anymore. And that's like totally legitimate. Like, how am I gonna bet my groceries of the week on like whether or not they just like brought a thing, right? That's terrible. So farmers have actually they've tried to solve this problem on their own. They have a thing called community supported agriculture. You pay a farmer ahead of time, and then you get a share of the crop, which is really cool. Unless it hails, and then they got the crop, and you got the food. So when I first moved here to Colorado Springs, like about 2 years ago, I know local foods. I think it's Colorado. Everybody here, right? It's like all crunchy. It's fun. So I wanted goat milk. My wife and I drink goat milk. So the way you do this, right, is you go to the farmer's market and you find something that looks like they know what they're doing. You're like, where do I get goat milk? And they're like, can. Comes at 4. It's Safeway on Wednesday. It's like a drug deal if I drink goat milk. There's no great way to do this. So there have been like platforms, right, that have tried to come along. It's a very centralized thing where it says, this is the thing, we're going to have these drivers, and we're going to bring the food. And it's super expensive because you have all this overhead for this highly centralized system. So you're charging farmers like 7% of gross revenue on top of 3% to treasury. 10%? That is all of the margin in farming. Like farmers are crazy. I love them because they're crazy, right? Because they're going to grow food and try to make money. And that is a terrible business model. But the platform that I'm working on now is essentially a way to unite consumers, right, who want stuff with people who haven't. Because if it is just as easy to do something that's better for the planet, like I don't believe people are going to change their behavior. Like that's a terrible idea. I want to make it easier to do the right thing, or just as convenient, right? This whole like you've read Nudge. Like libertarian paternalism is the joke, is that I'm not going to take the option away, I'm just going to make it suck. So we're doing this from kind of two perspectives. So one is, I don't know if you've ever been to the farmer's market and tried to like buy some stuff. They've got like the infamous trio, they got a solar power calculator that they total it up in, and then they take the little PayPal or Square app and they just swipe your card like 6 times. And they're like, oh, it's me, it's not you, right? Like, trying to do it. And then they write it down in a little notebook and all of that. So it's terrible. It's terrible as the consumer. I actually donated time for to like work for like one of these farms. It's so embarrassing. So we've literally, I went through the trouble to figure out what do you have to do to build your own point of sale. It sucks, by the way, but we did it. And so now we're just giving card readers that take chips in. I can do it with my watch, like the contactless thing. It's like 2019. We should be able to do this. But really, then the other thing is building a marketplace where, again, like the Uber thing, I'm not going to grow the food and sell it to you, mostly because I can't. I'm not very good at it. But what I would love to do is create a platform where people can come and they can add that predictability. So instead of going to the farmer's market to see what they have, I'm going to go and pick up the stuff that I ordered this week, right? So from the farmer's perspective, they put stuff up. They got carrots, they got tomatoes, they got apples, and you purchase it and go pick it up. So it's just like picking up your groceries at Whole Foods when you order ahead and that sort of thing. So here's the thing, right? I'm not saying that you got to eat all of our food local, right? Because tastes are going to change. But how can we leverage technology, right, to put community back in our everyday experiences. How do I look somebody in the eye and know that they did a thing that helped me do a thing, right? And I firmly believe that we have the power to do that now, right? We can take these things that have been highly centralized before and have had a big impact on our planet and our community. We can take it back. We can take it back simply because we have the power and the technology to do it, and all of you are participating in that, and so am I. That's all. Yeah, right? Decentralized. Powers are pushed towards the user, accountability is maintained, overhead is lowered, barrier to compete is lowered. We can achieve those things. We can take back community by decentralizing. Thank you.